Hi everyone, my name is Huda Al-Hogani, Director of Abu Dhabi Sustainability Group, ADSG. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the ADSG and CDP webinar, and we are organizing this technology engagement for first time to our members and partners. So we hope that you will find it useful, and please feel free to share with us your feedback at the end of this webinar. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our partner, CDP team, for sharing their knowledge with us and for their continued and valuable participation and support for ADSG activities, which started years ago. To name a few, joining Abu Dhabi Sustainability, ADSG during Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week in 2014, their participation as a key speaker at ADSG Hiwar on financing the green economy. Also, their continuous, their contribution to sustainability journal and pilot project with Master. I would like to start by introducing our speakers in London. Dexter Galvin, Head of CDP Supply Chain at Carbon Disclosure Project. Christy Cook, the Account Manager of Supply Chain at the Carbon Disclosure Project. Pan Nugubi, the Global Procurement Supply Sustainability Lead. Sandra Anani, ADSG Event and Communication, who helped on organizing and moderating our webinar today. And now we'll take a few minutes to introduce ADSG. The Abu Dhabi Sustainability Group is a membership initiative established in 2008 by Environment Agency Abu Dhabi as networking platform, whose mission is to promote sustainability management in Abu Dhabi by providing knowledge sharing and learning opportunities for government, private companies in a spirit of cooperation and open dialogue. The group aim to encourage co-responsibility in Abu Dhabi, ensuring all partners work towards achieving the goal of economic, environmental, and social sustainability, and to contribute of intercultural dialogue about global and local sustainability trends that are relevant locally and globally. This is a snapshot of the development of ADSG over the last 8 years and important milestones. The establishment of the group in 2008, the membership which started, the increase in membership started with 15 members and now over 45. Some important activities: launch of Sustainable Procurement Flagship in 2012, the strategy development of the group and review in 2011 and 14. Also, the key Sustainability Forum, the launch of Abu Dhabi Sustainable Business Leadership Awards and Forum in 2015. This is the ADSG members and our supporters network, which is around 47 leadership organizations across the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, from public and private sectors, working together to address key sustainability challenges identified by members in different platforms of collaboration for the purpose of realizing the vision of Abu Dhabi and UAE. I would like to share with you the ADSG priorities with our strategic direction of integrating sustainability governance to achieve impact as outlined in ADSG House of Strategy, supporting alignment between ADSG members and Abu Dhabi and UAE, increasing members' impact through shared initiatives and knowledge-sharing flagship programs, advocate for integrated sustainability among ADSG and Emirate regional and global stakeholders, and membership. So, as I mentioned, ADSG holds many activities to engage members and stakeholders on multiple platforms. Okay. So we started to work with CDP several years ago, and today's webinar is an demonstration of our continued collaboration towards building a more sustainable future. Part of ADSG capacity as an enabler is to establish networking and partnership opportunities and platforms locally, regionally, and internationally. Our partnership with CDP aims to raise awareness and open dialogue on key sustainability issues such as carbon management and sustainable supply chain. ADSG and CDP collaboration allow us to share knowledge and expertise for the benefit of sustainability practitioners in the region. So now I would like to hand over to my colleague and the CDP team and Ben.
Thank you very much, Huda. I hope everybody can hear me clearly. My name is Dexter Galvin, and I run the supply chain program at CDP. We're absolutely delighted to join this webinar today. We're honored and privileged to continue to partner with ADSG, and we look forward to a long and fruitful partnership over the coming years. We've got a fantastic agenda today. I'm going to give a very quick intro to the supply chain program and to CDP more broadly. I'm also going to look at why the supply chain is important. I've only got 5 minutes to run through that, so then I'm going to quickly hand over to my colleague, Christy, who's going to ably take you through the supply chain program. And then we're absolutely delighted to be joined by Ben from Accenture, who's going to take us through the member experience of the program, which will really bring what myself and Christy are talking to life. So very quickly, CDP was founded in the early noughties to accelerate solutions to climate change by putting relevant data at the heart of business, policy, and investment decisions. I'm just going to see if I can move to the next slide here. It says there's a slight delay on it. So as I was saying, quick introduction to CDP, then Christy's going to take us through the program in more detail, and then we're going to hear from Accenture, and then we have a fantastic opportunity for more questions from you guys. So if you could continue to send questions through the chat function as we go through the presentation, that would be fantastic. So just very quickly about CDP. We were founded in the early noughties, as I mentioned. We are essentially built around a very simple concept. Back then, our founder went around to the major banks and building societies in London and asked them to sign a letter to ask large listed corporations to disclose their carbon emissions. Back then, when we started at CDP, we had to say, because of the perceived threat of climate change, because the financial community wasn't even comfortable committing to the idea that climate change was real at the time. We used that letter to get large listed corporations to disclose their data to CDP, particularly on carbon and climate change. And we've had some considerable success since then. We now represent over 820 institutional signatory investors who have a combined assets under management of over $100 trillion. So when we ask a listed corporation to disclose to CDP, we carry rather a large stick. The success of that investor pressure on climate change has been incredibly powerful, and we've seen over $53 billion of savings disclosed through CDP and our climate change program. Over the years, we've also introduced water into CDP's programs. So the same model, we essentially send a request to large listed corporations on behalf of investors to get them to disclose their water data. So what they're doing on water, how they're managing water in their operations, and we also look into their supply chain, on how they're managing water in their supply chain. So we've seen a fantastic growth in the number of companies disclosing on water, and we can see 1,780 actions to improve water security reported through CDP in 2015. So fantastic momentum there on water. And then our newest program, which is forests, or our deforestation work, has grown quite considerably, and now we have 365 investors who are actually asking companies, large listed companies, to disclose what they're doing on forests and deforestation around the world. This is a much more targeted request. We don't send this to every company. We're very careful to ensure that this request goes to companies that have been identified as having some impact on deforestation around the world. And so over the last couple of years, we've grown this fantastic momentum on the investor side. In 2003, we sent our first request to Walmart to disclose their data. They refused to respond for a number of years, and then eventually they disclosed their data to their investors. But they wanted to do it well. They wanted their first public disclosure to be a really solid disclosure. So they gathered all their data together, and they discovered some really interesting things about their own operations. So they had been investing most of their efforts in their logistics and transportation fleet, but when they gathered all their data together, they realized that they could focus more of their efforts on their refrigeration units in their stores because of the emissions associated with leaking refrigerants and the energy consumption of their refrigeration unit. That was a huge learning for Walmart, and they came back to us and said, okay, we're a large store or chain supermarket. Most of our emissions are actually in our supply chain. We were aware of this. 95% of Walmart's emissions are actually beneath the surface in their supply chain. So what was key for Walmart was to actually understand the emissions in their supply chain. So they said to us, could we take that request that you send on behalf of investors, and could we maybe send that question out to our supply base? And that happened in 2007, and that was the start of the supply chain program. But why are we looking at supply chains? Well, we know that the world population is increasing. We have increased pressure on resources around the world. We're currently using 1.5 planets worth of resources, and this will grow to at least 2.3 planets worth in 2050. So we have a massive amount of pressure on resources at the moment, and this is only increasing. And that, of course, leads to increased costs. Now, we've seen from our disclosures that a lot of companies face risk from the increased frequency and severity of extreme weather events. We're also seeing a lot of risk associated with increased regulation. Essentially, in December, the world committed to a reduction target of sorts in the Paris Agreement. And now every jurisdiction around the world is going to have to implement regulation in order to meet the requirements of the Paris Agreement. That means huge regulatory cost coming along for suppliers, and so huge increase in costs in supply chains that are not prepared for this regulation. And one of the most important steps to preparing for this increase in regulation is to start measuring and managing and understanding where your emissions are coming from. So one of the other areas and one of the reasons our members work with this is because of opportunity. It's not just to manage risk, but it's also to realize significant cost savings in the supply chain. Many of our member companies have realized the sort of low-hanging fruits of energy efficiency over the years, and they are very acutely aware of the opportunities in their supply base from those suppliers that haven't actually thought about this as a business issue in the past. So many of our member companies, and you'll hear more from Accenture, they're working collaboratively with their suppliers. They're driving transparency through procurement policy, and Accenture have some fantastic examples of this. And it's working to highlight risk prevention strategies. So how do we actually work with suppliers to manage this risk before any of this impact happens? So it's a fantastic opportunity for companies to work with their suppliers to identify cost savings and to deepen that relationship with key suppliers on sustainability, and work on those sort of fantastic collaborative opportunities. Last year, over 3,700 collaborative opportunities were disclosed to us by suppliers, and these are suppliers that really want to work with their customers to really reduce emissions. So I'm going to hand it over to Christy Cook, who's an account manager on my team here in London. And Christy works with a great number of our key member companies and can talk us through the program in more detail.
Thank you very much, Dexter, and thank you very much to Huda and Sandra at ADSG for hosting this joint webinar. I think it's a great opportunity to collaborate and really show the kind of work and possibilities that are available to companies out there on a wider scale. So thank you very much for that. Just a bit of housekeeping to start with. As Dexter mentioned, we will be having the Q&A at the end of these presentations. So after I hand over to Ben and Gobi from Accenture, once he's finished his presentation on the member experience of the supply chain program, we'll head into Q&As then. So if you do have any questions, please do write them in the chat box, and they will be collected, and then Sandra from ADSG will be moderating the panel, so to speak, so we can answer any questions that you may have. So yes, the supply chain program. So I'm going to go into a bit of detail on you know, how it works, what it covers, what the opportunities are, how you can use the program, and just a bit more detail of the kind of deliverables and the support you receive from the program itself. So in terms of putting it in context as the whole, as Dexter mentioned, we have an investor-led program and we also have the supply chain program. So Dexter mentioned that we have the investor signatories requesting information from these large corporations in order to disclose environmental data and information to themselves. And in turn, we also have those big corporations that are disclosing to CDP also taking a similar approach with their supplier base, so asking the similar questions to really get that transparency and understanding of their supply chain and the potential risks and opportunities that are within that area. So this is the supply chain journey. So we kind of tried to split it up into three separate stages. So the first stage, when you join the supply chain program, is really the stage of understanding and finding that range within your supplier base, understanding what are the risks and opportunities, identifying them in the second stage, and then prioritizing your efforts. So understanding where to focus your efforts based on that transparency that you've accumulated in the first stage. And then from there on, it's really understanding through the supplier engagement and through the program, what kind of impact are you having? You know, you're doing all this work through the program, you're identifying these opportunities and risks, but what kind of impact is it having? So the third stage is really measuring that impact and setting key ambitious targets against the kind of impact you're having within the supply chain. And this is a quick example of one of our supply chain members, AT&T, the big telecoms, US telecoms giant. And as you can see there from the quote, they set a target for 2015 to have all their suppliers, or the majority of their suppliers, tracking their own greenhouse gas emissions and having specific goals against those emissions. So you can see on the left-hand side there that by 2015, 80% of the suppliers that were requested to respond to the program were tracking their greenhouse gas emissions. And then you can see a majority of not quite reaching the emissions, setting the emissions target, but you can see really a positive outcome in reporting the emissions reductions activities that those companies and those suppliers are carrying out. In terms of the thematics, Dexter also touched upon this earlier in the presentation. As you know now, we have three sections: climate change, water, and forests, or deforestation. The forest component of the supply chain program, the forest component existed there for the investor-led program, but it is now being introduced as a new component for the supply chain program. You have a lot of pressure from consumers of these big, large corporations to look at deforestation within their supply chain. There's lots of kind of examples where commodities like palm oil are fairly controversial, and it's really the consumers as well as the companies themselves want to understand more about the risks within their supply chain related to deforestation. And this is a kind of similar slide to the previous slides. This really shows the numbers. So combined purchasing power of 2.7 trillion, as Dexter mentioned, over 3,000 collaborative opportunities identified through the program. Now, I want to try and get through this as much as possible, and this is being recorded and the slides will be available to you afterwards, but just to give an idea of the kind of diverse membership base, we have a lot of different companies from a lot of different sectors, and a lot of different individuals, a lot of different professional backgrounds as well. To give you a sense of the scale of the program, sorry, I seem to be having trouble moving to the next slide. There we go. Yeah, to give a sense of the scale of the program, these are the kind of companies that are currently supply chain members. So you can see, as I said before, a diverse range of companies from various different sectors. These are our water members, again, from a variety of different sectors. You've got automotive there, you've got the FMCGs, you've got the beverage sector, the pharmaceutical sector, etc. This is the sense of the scale of the program. So we invited 8,000 suppliers to respond to the program this year, and we had one instance where 47 different clients through the supply chain program were asking one supplier, which really shows that instead of the supplier having to fill out an information request 47 different times, they only have to submit one information request to satisfy the requirements of those 47 clients of theirs. This is again the reach of the program, so you can see in terms of because supply chains are global, we have to have a global reach. Now, in terms of how the cycle works and the outputs, I'm going to talk a bit about that. I am conscious of the time, so I'm going to whiz through these slides, but we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So you have 4 different stages. You have setting the strategy, that's what you want to get out of the program, what your expectations are, what you want to see and what you want to achieve and what you want to improve in terms of your supply chain. Then it's really getting into putting that into practice, communicating this with your supplier base so they understand why it's important. We then have the disclosure period that runs April to August every year, and on the back of that disclosure period we then look at start to look at accessing and analysing the data for those key insights to understand what your supply chain is like. This gives you a bit of an overview of the kind of sections or the kind of areas that the supply chain question covers. You have strategies, targets, the way suppliers are managing their emissions and water management within their own operations, but also it gives your suppliers an opportunity to really ask and propose new ideas for further collaboration between a customer and supplier relationship. Now, there are various outputs and deliverables for the cycle. As I mentioned, we already do the post-disclosure analysis, and that's really understanding what the data and what the information is telling you. We also do custom reports for every company. So this gives you an overview and a kind of snapshot of that data that's collected through your supplier base, so you can look at it in a legible format and a more understanding way to understand where you are in terms of your performance within your supply chain. We also have lots of supplier support, so we don't expect suppliers to be able to know exactly how to do this and how to respond to this program. So we provide a lot of supplier support, a lot of capacity building webinars, and we also cover it in several different languages. The Action Exchange Initiative, I won't go into too much detail, but it's really an output for your suppliers where they get a 2-page action plan on how to, on potential emissions reductions opportunities, some quick wins, as Dexter mentioned, and also access to a McKinsey solution, which is a software tool called Ready, which allows them to track these opportunities in terms of emissions reductions. The benefits, of course, one of the huge benefits of the supply chain program is the membership. Being part of a large club of corporate members, the networking and convening power that you can draw from that membership group is huge. As I'm sure you are already aware with your work with the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Group, you have a lot of access to best practice in this area, being able to share challenges and solutions in how to address these issues within your supply chain. And you can also benchmark yourselves in terms of how well you're engaging with your supply chain with other companies. This is new to 2016, and we can more than happy to go into this in more detail at a later stage. So that's all of it from me. I know that was very much a whistle-stop tour through what the supply chain is, how it works, what the outputs are, the levels of support. But I'd like to, and I'm delighted to hand over to Ben Gobi from Accenture, who is one of our long-standing supply chain members, to talk a bit more about what his experience and what his perspective of the supply chain program has been over these past few years.
Thank you, Christy. I believe I'm going to be handed control of the slides as that comes through. I just want to say thank you very much, Christy and CDP and ADSG, for really giving me the opportunity to kind of share Accenture's experience in our quest to really improve the way the world works and lives, and how CDP supply chain forms an important integral perspective in terms of how do we improve our supply chains and how do we help drive that good behavior that we ourselves want to live by. So I believe I do have control. Waiting for the slides to go through. Excellent. So as I walk through the slides, I just want to say that we'll be handing over to Sandra towards the end to facilitate the Q&A. Okay. So a very quick intro about myself. So I lead Accenture's procurement supply chain program from a sustainability perspective. I am based in London, and our remit is global across 55 countries, looking at several $1 billion worth of procurement spend. So Accenture is a leading professional services company, and we focus purely on strategy, consulting, digital operations, and operations around business outsourcing. We have more than 375,000 employees globally, as a revenue of 31 billion. And really, when you look at most of the top 100 clients that we operate with, most of them have been with us for more than 10 years, and that relationship continues to drive the way we want to kind of change the way the world works and lives. So going to the next slide. Is a slide play. So I sit within the global procurement program for Accenture. So we are spread across many, many countries, of which Europe, Middle East, and Africa forms part of the strategy. Our spend is obviously spread across all the different geographies, in Americas having quite a significant portion of that, followed by EMEA and APAC. And the types of goods and services that we buy will be typically around travel. By travel we mean having big contracts with some of the largest airlines, for example. We buy IT and telecoms, so mobile telephony and laptops and hardware and all of that good stuff. Workplace is very much about facilities, offices and desks and all the things that we need to make sure that the business is operating. So when it comes to the CDP supply chain program, so we've been members since 2010. So it's been a very, very, very exciting journey. We started off inviting very, very few suppliers at the beginning, and that has increased over time as the supply chain program has been embedded within our business. So more recently, we've invited some north of 140 companies, which represent significant spend with Accenture. And last year, we had a really, really good disclosure score. Disclosure meaning that we invited about 100 companies, and 71% of them gave us information about what are they doing to drive change, to drive environmental performance. To give you perspective on that point, when we invite suppliers, I think you're looking at a carbon impact, but then you're thinking about the risk within the supply chain, right? If your suppliers cannot manage something, they cannot influence it, right? So we want to drive that great transparency within the supply chain. So in doing that, for example, last year we had some collective savings of about $416 million, right? And 8.8 million tons of CO2 that was reduced. That is significant, right? So when you consolidate all of that with all the other 89 members Christy shared earlier, it's a very, very huge impact in driving good behaviors and good performance of supply chain. And we feature on CDP's global A-list because we do quite well ourselves. So we do participate in the investor program as well, which Christy alluded to earlier. And as a result of all this work we've been doing, we decided to launch a new goal as part of the Paris COP21 discussions. What are governments doing to reduce climate impact, and what are non-state actors, corporations like Accenture, doing to drive this in the supply chain? My slide seems to be delayed in moving. Next. Okay, it's coming up now. Right, so during Paris December COP21, Accenture went through an internal review process to think about whether we formalize all the great work we've been doing since 2010. How do we make sure that suppliers are disclosing to us, but also doing some really great things about setting actual targets, right, and setting actual initiatives to reduce their environmental impact? If people do set targets, you're setting a kind of commitment to say you reduce X. And so the goal that we set ourselves is to, by 2020, we'll expand to 75% in terms of key suppliers who disclose their targets and actions. Paris COP21 was very much about actions, and we are hoping that we'll be contributing towards that. So we have increased the number of suppliers that we are invited last year, and those suppliers do have a material impact, and predominantly within the travel, IT, telecoms, and workplace categories, although we do have some others within the contractors categories, for example. But the idea is we want those suppliers to disclose, and we also want them to disclose their targets and initiatives. And being a big company, some of these suppliers will also be clients, so sometimes we have a dual relationship in how we drive that. So I wanted to give you a much more, kind of high-level view of the program, the supply chain program. So we started in 2010, inviting a few number of suppliers. Over that time, we have integrated the supply chain program within our supply chain. So what that means is we have changed some of our procurement systems to make sure that the teams, wherever they are, they start scoring for and waiting for environmental, social, and governance factors. And obviously, for the environment piece, we are looking at very much on the CDP supply chain and the environment information that the suppliers will give us. That change is being embedded in the business. In fact, we do have an external goal around this piece to make sure that we have evidence of this across the world, that all our procurement people are doing this. So this is very much about driving the right behavior. We are engaging suppliers through CDP so that they can give us and share their progress and be transparent. But at the same time, we're engaging our new suppliers to say this is important. And so that kind of have a virtuous cycle where people and suppliers, the business and procurement people understand that this is very, very much key to how we want the business to move towards. In doing this, we also do execute some training internally for the procurement people. So we will run events like this, like an internal procurement community call, as we call them, which is basically a webinar as well, to get the teams to understand what are the pressing things that we need them to do. Do they need any help? What kind of issues are they coming across? And how do we make sure that this is embedded? And the great thing now we find, as of recently, is we have a couple of very, very big RFPs taking place right now. And the teams are saying, oh, did my supplier submit to the CDP? Do we have that information? Can we please share the list of suppliers that actually participated? Because we need to drive that good change. So they know that when they need to score a supplier, they will be coming to me to provide environmental information, or they can also go and ask the supplier themselves. Now, some of the other things that we are developing around this piece is the circular economy. So how do we actually make sure that everything that we are buying has consideration, zero waste consideration? Circular economy is effectively how do you build or buy a product where you do not have any waste and everything is created and made and used with sustainability in view. So some of those exciting perspectives are run by our sustainability services team, but we are also looking to utilize that in, for example, how we buy IT, hardware, telecoms, and so forth. In terms of monitoring, what we are doing is introducing a couple of KPIs. We have a few more in the pipeline, but they will very much focus around the evidence. So we want the teams to do it, but now we're going towards numbers. Please show us how many RFPs have you actually scored, and what is the actual weighting. And actually that drives a really great behavior because we now know which regions, so we can tell you which regions around the world are scoring for travel highly or scoring workplace highly and so forth. So that's what I wanted to share with you, and I hope you know, if you want to have some more information, you can go to accesschip.com/environment, and you can see some of the other goals that we launched during Paris, which really forms very much our desire to make sure that we improve the way the world works and lives as we do business. And that is all. I'll pass it back to you, Sandra, to kind of facilitate the Q&A.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you very much, Christy and Dexter. And thank you very much, Huda, for the intro and for holding this event, really. I hope everybody who's joined us on the webinar is finding all the information useful. If you have any final questions you wish to pose to the panelists, please do so now. We do have some questions already, so I hope Christy and Ben, you're both quite prepared to take some questions now. First of all, can I start, Christy, with a question for you? How easy is it to join the CDP Sustainable Supply Chain Program?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Sandra. Well, in short, it is fairly easy. What we really need from you is to understand which suppliers that you're going to invite to the program. So we need a list of those suppliers. The supply chain program, and maybe that's one thing I didn't mention, is a targeted approach. So we don't look at your entire supply chain, which is not the kind of pragmatic approach to addressing emissions, but we look at where your supply chain is of significant impact from an emissions perspective. So a lot of companies do this based on inviting suppliers who amount to 80% of their spend or 80% of their carbon impact within their supply chain. Some do it in a different way. Some look to invite suppliers where they think they're going to have the biggest impact in terms of the feasibility of working with those suppliers. So that decision is really up to you as the organization, but we help you understand how to form that list of suppliers so that we can kickstart joining the program. Once that's done, everything else really falls into place in the run-up to the new disclosure year.
Thank you very much, Christy. So it's good and encouraging to hear that joining is fairly straightforward. Can I just ask you from your own experience as well in terms of how, when organizations do want to join, if you can just share with our audience, what are the key challenges that you've come across and how can people overcome these?
Yes, of course, happy to. I think one of the key challenges is in the first disclosure cycle when you are the key challenge, and which is easily kind of overcome by a solution, is communication. Communicating to not only to your suppliers but to your internal procurement team, your buyers, on why you're doing this and why this is important. That can be a challenge in terms of having an effect on the response rate of your suppliers, how many suppliers actually respond to your request through the program. But if you do it in the right ways, if you communicate effectively and in advance and prepare for the disclosure cycle, you can overcome those challenges fairly easily. I think the other benefit of being able to overcome those challenges is having access to this wide breadth of member experience, where you know, you can share these challenges with your fellow members of the program, and there may be members like Accenture who have been in the program for several years now and can give you some real key advice on how to tackle those challenges within the first year. Not sure if Ben from Accenture would like to add anything to that.
Yes, so in terms of selecting your key suppliers, we would definitely recommend, I would personally recommend that you look at your areas where you think you've got significant emissions impact, as well as spend, right? So if you know those areas, you can zone in those key suppliers initially and try and invite those, and then learn from the experience of the suppliers. When you do have pushback, in terms of the challenges that you might get, I think it does help very, very greatly if you do have senior leadership support on this. So get the supplier right, work with your senior leadership to make sure that that is the right suppliers that you need. And I know it does help that then you see the supply chain fitting into a wider business goal that you will have around the environment. So if you do have that, that is a really good thing. Otherwise, procurement, you can be the change, the motivator for that change to make sure that the business moves towards this. Because I think Dexter alluded to earlier, sometimes supply chain emissions are nearly 4 times your organization's impact, right? So if you're working to get 10, 15 suppliers at the beginning, you'd be surprised that is actually significant in terms of material impact on your organization. But do focus on the key suppliers and then get the senior leadership support.
Thank you very much. I mean, those are really, really excellent tips and very good insights in terms of what the challenges could be and looking for ways to overcome those. Thank you for sharing those with us. A question for both Ben and Christy now. What could be quick wins for a company that is starting on the journey towards sustainable supply chains?
Sure. Yeah. I'm happy to start on this, and then Ben can go into more detail. I think it's not so much about quick wins with supply chains. Supply chains are very complex animals, so to speak, and things that, although there can be relatively quick wins, it is a gradual process. But where you can really understand the impact that you're having at a fairly immediate stage or within a fairly short time frame is the way the program is used to inform and educate your supplier base. So if you're asking these questions, if you're requesting this information and data from your supplier base, they start asking the questions internally. Why are they asking these questions? Why is it important? Perhaps this is perhaps this is something we should be looking at if they're not already looking at it. And then what you see in terms of the response rate, you see a growth in the response rate over the disclosure cycles, but you also see, as Ben alluded to earlier in his presentation, the kind of growth in these companies having more of an understanding or having more of a focus in this area, starting to measure their emissions, for example, if they're not doing so already, setting ambitious targets, and this all feeds into the goal that everyone is trying to achieve in reducing the climate impact, not only within your own operations as a business, but influencing your entire supply chain as well.
Yeah. And so to add to that, once you've done everything that Christy has just mentioned, when you do review the first initial responses, look at the types of initiatives or collaborative initiatives your suppliers are suggesting. You will see that some of those will actually result in cost reductions actually that might benefit you and benefit the submitting organization. So and that will be cost. So the CDP, I think, was one of the first slides which Dexter had. It drives cost reduction because people look at how they make products in a new way, because you're asking them to reduce their environmental impact. So they become innovative, right? How do I make this cut differently? Less material, less cost. And so that benefits society greatly. So in terms of a quick win, I think that you have to think about it as a long-term thing, because some of these innovative products or ideas that come to reduce impact do take a little bit of time and investment initially to get them off the ground, but then the overall impact on the CO2 follows as well afterwards.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you, Christy, very much. We've got quite a number of questions that are flooding in. And I'm just very aware of the time. We've only got 5 more minutes. So some of the questions that we've received will be, are you able to give us a brief overview of how you would work with selected suppliers, for example, who contribute to the 80% of emissions. Can you give an example? And what pushback do you typically get from a supplier?
Yeah. So let me start with that question. So we are very fortunate that we have been inviting and working with suppliers that really do understand this already. So they know that transparency is good, and so they believe in actually doing, what we do ask. And likewise, Accenture is a supplier to quite a lot of companies, and we do also submit and are transparent, and because we believe that this is a really good thing. Now, we do recognize that sometimes suppliers might be new on the journey, so they do need a bit of help. So we're collaborating with CDP. I do run a webinar for our suppliers, and on that webinar, we try and walk through what is CDP, what are the kind of things are we going to be looking at the beginning, earlier when they first report, right? So you want the suppliers to focus on certain questions which your business thinks are important, and so get them to report on those, and then gradually move them to other questions that you need. But if the suppliers appear not to be reporting, so this year what we've actually done, we got our Chief Procurement Officer to actually send out the invitation reminder to those suppliers that were not submitting. And I think this year will be the highest submission year we've ever had, although we've even increased our suppliers. So getting that leadership support at a high level is very important. Within the workshops themselves, we've introduced things around circular economy, so companies can think about the different innovative things that they could do, right? Small little things that they could do initially. We've also have a big initiative around buying renewable energy across the world, and that's a project I'm leading right now. So then one of the things is, how can we get some of our suppliers to benefit from that kind of initiative? So through this help, through this support of the forums that we run with CDP, and I think there's also a nice CDP email link that any supplier that struggles, they can go there, they can get some help, or we can have a one-to-one with a supplier. And I think for the smaller suppliers, you've got to be helpful, although the survey is also, there's a shorter version of that, but you need to be helpful for them to help them to start reporting. And I hope that helps with the question.
Thank you very much, Ben. Christy, did you want to add anything?
No, I don't think so. I think Ben summed up that question fairly concisely, and I think coming from Ben as a member, he has the kind of first person perspective in what these challenges are. So he's definitely the one to talk, and he did a very good job of that.
Thank you very much. We'll just take one last question, and we'll have to be quick with the answer to stay on time. We have a question here around, are sustainable strategies driven by markets, or are they process-driven in the oil and gas sector? I don't know if either of you gentlemen would like to take that.
I don't know. I think this is a question for, I guess, I don't know, Dexter and Christy. But the one thing that has really helped drive this discussion has been COP21, and obviously there's a huge drive towards renewables, right? And so we'll see a lot of, I guess, divestment and re-innovation, reinvention. How do we utilize the products we already have and make them, make new things out of them, I guess. But I think Dexter can comment more on that, and Christy.
I think to add to that, I think Ben's absolutely right. I saw some interesting data at a conference yesterday from a research unit, and they were basically showing that in the past few years, national expectations of national governments has always been at the top in terms of tackling the climate change agenda and what their part is to play in it. What's interesting now, and what we're interestingly seeing in 2016 is the private sector and those large corporations. They're actually the expectations, public expectations of their contribution and what they should be, what they should be doing in terms of contributing to tackling the climate change agenda has increased a lot, and it's got to the extent now where national governments and private sector, the expectations are on the same level from a public perspective, which I think is a really key driver there. But I think it's definitely something that, due to public pressure, this could really cause a big push in looking and shifting the responsibility in that direction.
Yes, hi, this is Dexter here. Just a quick comment on that. I think essentially the Paris Agreement in December has given us the ambitious foundations for further work. It doesn't lay out in detail what we need to do to actually meet those targets, but it is a line in the sand, and it's clear what we need to do. So the interventions that we'll try and catalyze over the coming years, one of the most important of those interventions is going to be through the supply chain of large companies that are already engaged, that already have emissions reduction targets for their own operations. But the catalyst for further reductions will come through people like Ben pushing their key suppliers to do more, and this will give us access and leverage over organizations across the world that haven't been engaging on this issue in the past. Last year, over 1,300 companies disclosed to CDP for the first time through our supply chain program, and these are companies that have never considered this issue before. So it's a real game changer when we start to get them to measure, manage, and reduce their emissions. So the supply chain is an absolutely crucial part of the corporate world's responsibility to meet the commitments outlined in the Paris Agreement.
Thank you, Dexter, for that. Thank you, Christy, and thank you, Ben. Really, in summation, the supply chain has a huge part to play, particularly as this week marks the fact that we crossed 400 ppm threshold, potentially without being able to reverse that. And this has a significant impact in terms of remaining at the below 2 degrees for global warming, which was agreed during COP21. So really, this webinar has made a beginning in terms of a discussion with the ADSG members around how the role of private and government sector comes together quite neatly, in that we all have a responsibility here, even as individuals, to make a difference and procure and buy, and the decisions that we make in terms of how we invest our money should be made responsibly. So thank you very much. I'm very grateful for all of your contributions and for taking all the questions. I thank all our attendees as well for posting questions, and I apologize that we haven't been able to put all your questions across today, but hopefully this means that we will be holding many more webinars to come where we can take on board more questions and comments. I will now hand over to Huda Al-Huqani, Director of the ADSG, for her closing comments and the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Just quickly want to highlight the upcoming key ADSG event, the Abu Dhabi Sustainable Business Leadership Forum, our platform for discussion and debate that provide a great opportunity for knowledge sharing and networking. The forum is open to all interested stakeholders, both locally and internationally. So the Abu Dhabi Sustainable Business Leadership Forum key objective is to promote sustainability across the region and to demonstrate how to design and implement responsible business practices across the businesses. In terms of next step with CDB, our collaboration with CDB is building on earlier work, and we are looking forward to further collaboration in the coming month. Especially, we would like to build on ADSG Sustainable Procurement Flagship Program. And as we see opportunities and synergies on sustainable supply chain management, looking ahead with CDB. And for joining CDB supply chain programs, I would like to ask you to, ADSG member, to feel free to contact us or CDB directly for more information. And we look forward for CDB to join the ADSG Forum soon. So at the end, I would like to thank you all, our panelists and speakers and members for joining our webinar today. And we request you to take time to fill out the feedback survey, which will come up on your screen once the webinar ended. Thank you so much.